So, for my presentation, I'm going to talk about nationalism in Libya and how it caused the current conflict and how it is similar to the First Balkan Wars, which occurred before World War One and was one of the main causes of World War One because it had many nationalistic ideas. So, one of the main causes of the Libyan conflict were the ethnic differences in the country. The Arabs and the Tabuk people taking up the largest chunk of the country, and the Berbers taking up the smallest. But the Arabs mainly controlled the most developed part of the country with much infrastructure and many oil fields, while the Tabuk people control a smaller area with less resources and less infrastructure, and the Berbers controlled even less areas and only had one larger city in their area. And they were also oppressed by the Arabs a lot of the time since they were minorities and because they saw them as not being equal to them. As well as the death of Gaddafi led to a power vacuum in the country, and which was to be filled by any of the groups that were mentioned before. They saw the opportunity to fill in the vacuum of power, and take control of the country. But since they all wanted to control the country, conflict broke out between all the groups, and it is still going on today. But before that, when Gaddafi was in power, he was the dictator of the country, and he controlled everything, so he could keep everything in check and not have any conflicts with other countries. So the fighting has been going on since 2014, so around 3 or 4 years. The main combatants are the Libyan National Army, also known as the Tobruk-led government, and the Government of National Accord, which is a UN-based government, and it is the original government that was put in place after the defeat of Gaddafi. The Libyan National Army controls the oil reserves and the refineries in the eastern and southern part of the country, which gives them a great advantage over many of the other groups who lack the resources, mostly the oil, to run machinery and other important fat assets of the army, so that they are the big advantage compared to other groups. Meanwhile, the Government of National Accord, since it is supported by the United Nations, and it also it has an advantage over some of the groups, but it also controls the large part of the infrastructure, mostly in Tripoli and smaller cities around it, and with Tripoli having 2.5 million people in it out of Libya's 6 million. So that gives them a great advantage over many of the smaller groups, such as the Berbers and the Islamic State. Now, the Islamic State, like in many other war-torn countries, like in Syria and Iraq, took a chunk out of the country and took advantage of the chaos to take the resources and recruit the people living there for their cause, similar to what happened in Syria. And in the Berbers, who are really oppressed by the Arabs their whole existence, saw the opportunity to break free of the Arab rule, so they took a chunk out of the country in the southwestern part, which is not as valuable as many of the other parts since it does not contain any oil, or it doesn't contain any large cities except for one. And they are the big disadvantage compared to other groups, and so they don't attack other groups or are not attacked by groups most of the time, since they are not a big threat to any of the other ones. Now, the similarities to the First Balkan War is quite obvious by looking at the two maps, and one of the maps from before. The ethnic map shows how the Balkan region before World War I was really disunified and really messy, since it had many different ethnicities in it, and overlapping parts. Just like in Libya, there were different ethnicities in different parts of the country. Some were oppressed, some were not, and it led to the first Balkan War, because they had a nationalistic feeling towards the Ottoman Empire controlling a lot of their land, and so they wanted to free up their people, and also they wanted to gain the resources of that land. Just like in Libya, the Government of National Accord and many other groups want to control the oil fields so that they can take complete control of the country. As well as in the Balkan region, the countries did not really get along. Just like in the Second Balkan War, the Bulgarians attacked their neighbors, which led to the Second Balkan War. And in return, these two conflicts led to World War I, since this sparked a nationalistic idea in all of the countries in the Balkan region. And so the Austrians and Germans supported the Ottoman Empire to defeat the surrounding Balkan nations, the so-called Balkan Union, because they wanted to keep their foothold and power in the Balkan area and not let go, because they saw the power keg that was about to explode, and which would lead to the First World War, and which it did. And so they supported the Ottoman Empire, similar to how the United Nations supports the Government of National Accord in Libya, and the Balkan areas were supported by other smaller nations, if we can call it that, like France and Britain supported the Balkans, since they saw the rise of the Balkan countries as a way to defeat and help their efforts against the Germans and the Austrians, since they were scared that Germany was going to take over as the leading power, and that Austria might completely take over the Balkan region. Now, some of the differences between the two conflicts is that there are some radical religious reasons why they attacked each other. In the First Balkan War, there were no religious reasons at all. It was only nationalistic. But in Libya, there's the Islamic State, who are very radical Islamists, and so they took a chunk out of the country and they try to convert everyone to their view. But in the Balkan War, none of the countries tried to do that. They only fought for the resources and for the manpower that was in the region. And also in the Balkan Wars, the countries agreed upon given borders, but in Libya, it is inside one country, and the fighting is more of a civil war rather than a full-on war between different countries. So, and only one country will come out of it superior to all others, most likely the Tobruk-led government, since they control the oil fields. Now, that was my presentation on nationalism in Libya and how it led to the current conflict, and we can wonder how this conflict will lead to even larger conflicts like it did in the Balkan War and in the Second Balkan War, and how those led to World War I. This could also lead to a much larger conflict in the future. And using this QR code, you can go see my bibliography.